When it comes to audiovisual entertainment, I am a simple guy. Really, I like violence, blood, gore, psychological or philosophical drama, and to explore precisely those themes and tropes most people would brush off as being too dark or over-complex. I like Garth Ennis and Junji Ito, and I prefer Goblin Slayer over Swords Art Online, Game of Thrones over Maze Runner, and films like Breathless, Ghostland, or High Tension over German romantic comedies. Several nights I lay awake at night, pondering about the why. Perhaps violence just amuses me. Why does it just tickle my pickle and that's it, I would ask myself? Wouldn't be too hard to expect from someone whose ancestors turned killing into an economic machinery after all. But in reality, I'm not a violent person at all. It's just a matter of aesthetics, or violence as means to stress the dangers that await the characters to me. I'm with my man Tarantino on that one.
It's an aesthetic thing. People will attach a moral thing to it, but that's bullshit. It's just one thing movies can do.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be realistic, quite the contrary. Sometimes exaggerations or stylized imagery are what makes the scene work in the first place, either in a funny way or in a totally fucked up what's the shit that I'm just watching kind of way. So that wasn't quite nailing it. In dramatic storytelling, I think one of the most crucial goals for any director is to create immersion, to make his audience feel and understand what's at stake for the characters. And don't get me wrong, that's not synonymous with a lot of limbs being ripped off of side characters. Even though it's nice sometimes. But let's be honest, no show that claims death metal really gets their fucking priorities straight after the 5th season. But more importantly, we're meant to be put into the characters' shoes. We are to feel what they feel, develop empathy, share emotions. In simpler terms, we want to connect with the main characters on some level. But I cannot connect with someone who starts their day at Oompa Loompa Land riding unicorns to a secret fucking fountain of rejuvenating chocolate for breakfast. Am I right? Life's just no giant campus of liberal arts. I didn't make the rules. So, regardless of stylistic devices, levels of brutality and graphic violence, or cruel imagery of poor kids dying in refugee camps from diseases that are supposed to have disappeared hundreds of years ago, above all that, I enjoy the notion that I am watching something profound, something with multiple layers, something that at least mirrors our world in some way, something adult. And here's when Pixar enters the stage. When I was researching for this video, I often read the expression,
"This Pixar movie has a message that is just as powerful for older audiences as well."
But, well, I never really had the opinion that Pixar movies were in fact made for children. Think about it. WALL-E's basic premise works as a cautionary tale against rampant consumerism. Up's primary theme is death, which is not the most comprehensive thing for a child to begin with. And A Bug's Life, with its unnerving messages about tyranny and fascism, is so fucking dark I'm surprised the woman from Lights Out doesn't appear in it. But now, Soul. Oh, and by the way, if you're enjoying this video, click the like button and subscribe, for it really helps a greater cause and will cure world hunger someday. Who knows, maybe there's even a little Hitler joke involved now and then, so yeah. By the way, I'm going to be spoiling pretty much the entirety of the picture, so you've been warned. Pixar veteran Pete Docter alongside screenwriter Kemp Powers took it on to tell a story about an end-30 musician teacher who has a near-death experience and gets stuck in the afterlife, contemplating his choices and regretting the existence that he mostly took for granted. In pursuit to get back into his body, he has been invited to play alongside jazz legend Dorothea Williams that very night. Joe's soul enters another part of the larger spiritual ecosystem called the Great Before, a theoretical dimension where souls are prepared to enter their bodily counterparts on Earth. I love that storyline, mostly because it's like a Ricky Gervais bit turned real.
How can it be selfish to not bring a life into the world that doesn't exist on any level? It's not as a long sort of cabinet full of potential ghost fetuses going, "We want to be born," right?
Then, just like in Pixar's Brave, the actual plot unfolds approximately 1/3 through the movie, when Joe accidentally transfers his soul into the hospital cat Mr. Mittens, while 22 gets trapped in Joe's own body. Now, both characters have to maneuver their unfamiliar vessels through the streets of New York City, trying to change back. I like that very much because audiences need to see the characters struggle with something relatively tangible in order to connect with the conflict. And I know what you guys think. Switching a body isn't exactly inventing a new shape for the wheel, and you're right, we've seen that stuff since Freaky Friday, but it does the trick. Have you ever seen a Pixar film before? Then you know it's mainly about how things happen in these films, rarely about what happens. I think millennials, in particular, would benefit greatly from mentors who can help guide and develop their talents. This is where the boomers come in handy because they have experience and see mentoring millennials as some way they can continue to contribute to the workforce. That's kind of Joe's role, I assume, in that movie. That's what he contributes to the narrative. Because before Joe came along, 22 was like any millennial living in their parents' basement trying to figure out what to do with their lives while spending daddy and mummy money for weed and 3D printers.
Stop! Stay back here! Stay back here!
22 is a blasé cynic who has rejected mentorship from some of the greatest figures in mortal history. She's arrogant, smart-ass, sassy, attention-craving, erratic, and lonely, which in turn makes her straight-up sadistic in some regards. Also, she shows this patented millennial trademark mixture of being bored as fuck and letting the world know about it, but not willing to take action at the same time. And Tina Fey's voice, being the middle-aged woman that she is, adds a nice little contrast to it and complements this erratic personality with a hilarious level of confidence. I mean, you can clearly see that 22 is in dire need of a mentor at the beginning.
The fire is so pretty. I kinda wanna let it spread.
Nope.
It's a good thing she didn't want to go to Earth by then, you know? I wish a whole lot of people would be so self-reflective as she was, but no! Instead they dropped down to Earth like motherfuckers nonetheless, just to annoy the crap out of my life right now.
Everyone knows you're getting paid. You don't give a fuck about the charity or poverty-stricken kids. You want money. I'd effectively be paying your wages, you wiry little twat.
But yeah, you know, 22 didn't. Mainly because she was afraid, granted, but who cares? I say more power to her. I mean, look at it and tell me you don't think at that point if she drops down right now, there's no way she's not gonna be a cunt.
What?
I really enjoyed that flick as a whole piece of art, but if I had to break it down, 3 things stick out. A friend of mine, who's a complete proto-nerd when it comes to manga and anime, once told me that artwork above everything else is the crucial factor whenever he needs to decide what to read among the tsunami of new content being released each season. Especially when a storyteller decides to work with animations, the art style really speaks for itself when telling the story. Granted, that's the best case scenario and of course does not apply each time, but let's go with that as a premise to work with, shall we? With that in mind, Pixar's animators have always delivered some of the best looks in animated movies. I think you could still watch The Incredibles in theaters because its style is incredibly timeless. I mean, not every film needs the fluid motions of a Disney masterpiece. Not every CG picture has to have realistic light bounces, distinct hair simulations and waxy skin shaders of a Pixar blockbuster. But I don't mind if it does though, you know? In Soul, we get to see all the techniques we love from previous movies, but also something new that sets it apart. Backgrounds from the New York City scenes look almost photorealistic. In fact, not before the characters enter the frame would you know that you're watching an animated movie, which makes for a nice contrast. Then there's these little parts when you think you're tripping on acid, and I guarantee you that's exactly how the creatives would want you to experience them. I mean, look at that dude and tell me he's clean as a whistle. The movie describes these trippy scenes as the zone and present them as some kind of rave party aurora with neon light and particle effects. Yeah, I guess most millennials have felt this zone in some way or the other, right? And take it from me, when you're used to connect with greater spirits or have seen the true manifestation of theoretical concepts in your lampshade, then connecting to that movie is not that big of a step anymore. And they really follow through with the neon look and use it to distinguish the real-life scenes from those set in the great before. Distinguishing between 2 different settings by implementing visual contrast has always been a tried and tested go-to strategy in cinema. And in Soul, we see it executed to perfection. I mean, look at that purple-blue color palette, for example. And I totally went Homer Simpson when I saw the Cubism-style ghost kindergartners galumphing around in a pastel-colored paradise of surrealism. When I was in school, there was this hellish hot summer, and we would ask our teacher if he could transfer the lesson to the outside, and you responded, sure, I could also prepare a big bowl of junket. Which sounds way funnier in German now that I think of it, and it's a pretty bad joke to begin with, even though I laughed so hard back then that they must have wondered if I turn into a supervillain someday.
What, you think that's funny?
But it's the first memory that comes into my mind when I think about dry humor. Now I have a shit ton of examples ready to go.
He could die.
Fuck, Carol.
Yeah, we won't let that happen.
But even Garrett of Rivia would be jealous of some of the existential zingers they put in this movie.
I just use this voice because it annoys people.
They are drier than the pile of shit Johnny Depp found the next morning after Amber Heard defecated in his fucking bed. The interesting thing I noticed about Pixar humor, especially in those films directed by Pete Docter, is I feel they don't dance around on it too much. Like,
Oh, look at me, boys! I just cracked the most hilarious joke! How funny was it, eh? Yeah, Aunt Betty, I know that's interesting with your chemotherapy and all, but can we just get back again to how funny my joke was for a second, eh?
instead of waiting for the punchline to sink in, persisting on the joke he just cracked, Pete Docter lets the scene continue almost immediately. It It would not surprise me if children could follow the storyline better that way, you know, enjoying the presence of a funny orchestrated joke without getting distracted by it. Also, cutting away from a joke feels confident, because the director knows what he's doing. I know some jokes need time to properly unfold, but that's just not the case with dry humor. Its comedic appeal derives from the contrast with the ridiculousness or absurdity of the subject matter. In order to stress that contrast, the delivery of the joke is meant to be blunt, ironic, laconic, or apparently unintentional even. So as an adult, chances are that you can grasp the joke faster than a child, right? Because you gathered enough life experience to fully comprehend its subject matter. If not, well, then cutting away from a scene fast is funny in itself too.
That's a terrible plan. 1. Don't do this. 2. 3.
Wouldn't kill you to take a look into a book once in a while though.
Nice to meet you.
Furthermore, there are these little details hidden throughout the whole movie, like the light from Joe's glasses acting like a laser pointer for the cat, Terry's movements making the strings vibrate, or, my personal favorite, this subway poster being a dark prophecy like the intro sequence from King of Queens. You're prone to miss all of them in a heartbeat, yet little details like these make the experience even denser if you notice them. It's such a small benefit compared to the expenses that must have been huge, but you know, that's how the Pixar studios gained their reputation for being perfectionists both in technical and storytelling terms. And that's a benefit you can't weigh in gold. And here is where it all comes together, the creme de la creme of what makes this movie a masterpiece. If you're like me and you enjoy following adult-themed stories, look no further. But even the best quality synthetic leather is shit if handled by the hands of incapable child workers, am I right? So in order to make it from decent to great, there's 2 layers to the cake. A plot which is filled to brimming with identity crisis, fear of failure, paradox of choices, and other philosophical and psychological ideas that are now more relevant than ever in our modern day and age. You're living in the 21st century, chances are you'll find at least something you're familiar with. Joe Gardner's a middle-aged man who has always dreamt about being a jazz musician but ended up teaching a middle school music band instead. And they bad. When he's offered to perform in a famous jazz group, that's all he can think about. It's literally why he comes up with this super villainy plan of stealing the life pass from some unborn soul. Until he sees how important his teaching job is when 22 inspires one of his students in his own body.
You really love this.
Yeah.
Granted, it's super corny. But yeah, it's Pixar. It hits you right in the stomach, but always turns the corner. Do you know this feeling? Every time you imagine wasting your life in a gloomy cage of non-load-bearing office walls, you'd shit your eyeballs out. I'd personally would rather wipe my ass with sandpaper, but as a member of Generation Y, I will be forced into discussions about it at some point. So yeah, it's corny. Yeah, I know I have to deal with reality. And here's an even bigger yeah. I'm not an expert on ethics, but one could argue that Disney, being a ruthless international mega corporation that is trying to swallow the entertainment industry like a cumshot, a company that threatens to sue daycare centers if they put unauthorized drawings of Disney characters up on their walls, probably has no moral high ground whatsoever when it comes to lecturing anybody else about the emotional emptiness of materialism, you know? But still, I always enjoy someone go wanted on their office environment.
I'm alive! Free yourself!
When 22 fled into this surreal Mad Max wasteland that looks suspiciously as if it was filled with this magic sand, remember? This shit you could put into water, take it out, and then it was still dry? What a miracle that was! Anyway, that's depression right there, baby. She walked into a depression because she convinced herself of having no purpose. Depression. Depression. Depression! At 2, director Pete Docter knows his craft. He takes the wide array of grown-up themes and motives, gift wraps them, kisses them goodnight, and presents them to us camouflaged as allegories. Which is so sophisticated. No, really, it's fucking graceful. I'm serious, I love it.
Make a trade?
Looks like another hedge fund manager.
Because that way, the heavy themes are converted into something both children and grown-ups can understand in their own ways. When Marie Antoinette tells 22,
Nobody can help you. Nobody.
adults may notice a little punch against upper-class entitlement, considering Antoinette's infamous saying, "If the peasants don't have bread, let them eat cake, no?" Children, at the same time, retarded fucking nitwits as they are, will probably giggle about funny little ghost heads talking with accents. My point being, the scene functions either way. It's legible on 2 different layers. It's foolproof. Now, in film vocabulary, that is called double coding. With this technique, the director manages to shift between child-appropriate animated fantasy and adult-themed comedy drama. The flick gets pretty melodramatic towards the end, and because it's not The Godfather, well, that's when I took issue with the movie. It's obvious why producers feel they had to implement happy endings into their movies. It's a matter of appearance. Of course, you want those moral values and ideologies to prevail that are accustomed among your potential target audience. Also, you'd want everyone to leave theaters, or in this case their couches, with positive vibes, right? Keeping customers sedated and happy at the same time, just as Jean-Claude Van Damme in this scene.
Oh my god, me boys, he's saying the darkest shit, y'all. He's saying it's wrong to be happy, but I want to be fucking happy. You're worse than Hitler, man. Come on, me boys, let's hit him with a stick or something.
Sorry, you're right, because when has it ever been about anything else than spreading joy and glee amongst people, am I right? However, because you cannot really make distinct points when you simultaneously have to satisfy both children and adults alike, or US citizens and China for that matter, you just sell out, man, trying to strike a compromise, which accomplishes fuck all. Because your ending, as good as the film may be up until that point, ends up being shallow, superficial, straight up corny, and most importantly, rarely plausible.
That last box fills in when you're ready to come live.
Which is a bloody pity, because, let's be honest, there's just nothing like the bitter sweetness of a happy ending with a twist. Take the season 2 finale from The Boys, for instance. You've got your positive vibes, sure, but you still wonder, is everything really groovy though? If I were to be asked who would you recommend that movie to, I'd definitely say all millennials living in their parents' basements trying to figure out what to do with their lives while being a fucking burden to society. But also adults struggling with a midlife crisis or with suicidal thoughts about ending their empty lives by jumping out of their office windows could derive something from it, I guess. If only the realization that you're not alone dealing with this shit, because this shit is so common that they actually made a movie about it. Think about that. I mean, come on, they literally utter lines like,
You can't crush a soul here. That's what life on Earth is for.
Then there's another demographic, the weirdos. Look, I live near Reeperbahn in Hamburg, Germany, and I literally have to jump over crackheads to get to my front door. If you want to watch a movie that sometimes feels as if it was focusing on the world they experience in the top of their heads while the normies around them are riding on the high fucking horses judging them, then Soul is your kind of shit.
I put this man's soul in a cat.
Who cares? And you, we only have room for one weirdo here, so scram!
A musician might regard Soul to be an extended riff or a five-finger experience, which is very much in the spirit of jazz itself. Its portrayal in the movie is not only accurate in terms of its soundtrack and depiction while Joe plays the piano, but also its wider cultural context. For film buffs like me, Pixar delivers high-quality filmmaking with everything their reputation promises. Animated features that blend innovative design, styles and graphics, lively physical and verbal comedy, impeccably staged action and emotional moments. And it's moments like these when you realize that the absence of a cinema screen feels like a fucking sucker punch in your face. Those were my first impressions after I watched Soul, and it goes hand in hand with my thesis that Pixar movies are primarily made for adults. But I'd recommend it to children too. Perhaps they have an even better time with the picture, for they don't yet understand all the layers of high concept, you know? Because that's what Pixar does best. They perfected a concept I remember as being described as sprezzatura. Sprezzatura.
A certain nonchalance so as to conceal all art and make whatever one does or says seem to be without effort and almost without any thought about it.
In other words, Pixar makes it all look easy, simple for children to consume. And if it works like it worked for me with The Incredibles, they will someday rewatch it and rejoice over all the shit they missed before, but probably also be bummed about the clumsy happy ending they, however, liked as kids.
I'm gonna live every minute of it.
And that's when you eventually realize it's impossible to dance at both parties at the same time. Is it Pixar's most adult work so far? Possibly, but just not all the way through. And one thing's for certain, I tell you, if Pixar ever were to release a rated R, I guarantee you'd see me dancing like that.
You know, I wonder if I let the song play along to the end card, does it still fall under the fair use doctrine, which means I can use it? I mean, I'd be totally on board if it's not considered a critical commentary anymore, because I just let it play on without referencing anything from it. Then again, why should that not be a critical commentary, you know? I guess I just take my chances, see what happens. If you're watching this right now, you know.